Show me the crypto. Show me the crypto. Show me the crypto.
In a world on the brink of disruption, two men will bring you clarity by interviewing some of the most intelligent and influential names in the blockchain world. Welcome to Show Me the Crypto with your hosts, Wade Patterson and Ulf Lonergan.
Well, hi there, and welcome to Show Me the Crypto. My name is Wade Patterson.
And I'm Ulf Lonergan.
We're a couple of friends from Canada who love learning about cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology, and we're happy you're along for the ride. Whether you're a crypto virgin or you know your way around the block, we hope our interviews with some of the most intelligent and influential people in the blockchain space help deliver you with value. And on this episode, we're joined by best-selling author Ben Mezrich. In the early 2000s, Ben wrote Bringing Down the House, which was turned into the movie 21. 7 years later, he wrote The Accidental Billionaires, which was brought to the big screen as The Social Network. The Accidental Billionaires introduced the world to the Winklevoss Twins, who became the protagonists of Ben's 21st book, Bitcoin Billionaires. The book also launched Ben headfirst into the crypto and NFT space. Ben, welcome to Show Me the Crypto.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here. And when you read that, it sounds like I've done so much.
You have done so much, and that's why we're stoked to have you on. And speaking of all the things you've done, we were talking before we hit record here about this interview came about after a Twitter thread, and one of the most fascinating Twitter threads we've ever come across. Basically, you documented your life experience prior to writing Bringing Down the House. And at the time you wrote that you were in your reckless 20s, you were $2 million in debt. And I quote, "This happened before the hand of God came down and lifted your drunken, gambling, delusional ass toward your literary dreams." So I think this would be a fascinating starting point to jump in if you could kind of bring that Twitter thread to life for the benefit of our audience.
Sure. So, I graduated from college and I knew I wanted to be a writer, but I didn't know what that meant or how one got there. And I dreamed about being like, Bret Easton Ellis, Jay McInerney. It was like those crazy writers living the high life in bars in New York City and just that incredible lifestyle. And so what happened was it took me a while to break in, a while meaning like a year. So it wasn't really a while, but I was, in Boston. I graduated. I was writing, rejection. I had 190 rejection slips by the end of the first year. I wrote 9 novels in 1 year, which I don't recommend to anyone, just locked and writing around the clock. And so when I actually sold my first book, I was, really young. And I just kind of, lived like one would want to live at that age when one had a little bit of success. The problem was nobody was actually reading my book. I'm known for nonfiction, but I started out trying to write thrillers. I wrote for the X-Files. I was trying to sort of be Michael Crichton or someone like that. And I, by the end of, the next couple of years, I was massively in debt because I was getting these big checks from publishers, but nobody was reading the books. And I would just spend every penny as it came in, and then had credit card after credit card after credit. And so I just sort of dug myself into a deeper and deeper hole, living a pretty high life as a young writer who was, trying to make it on the scene. So that's where we started, I think, with that thread.
Yeah, the thread is quite the story. It goes a little more in depth, but
yeah.
But my question to you is, will you ever go even more in depth and maybe turn, create an autobiographical piece? And further to that, I know a little bit of the way you look at building your stories is you first think about, can this be done on the big screen? Could this become a movie? So maybe even further to your next book, we'll see you on or someone representing you on the big screen one day.
So I've been talking about that right now because, that Twitter thread, and then I wrote another thread about Russian oligarchs. So I went deep inside the world of Russian oligarchs to write a book called Once Upon a Time in Russia. And I was actually hanging out with Roman Abramovich and these really scary dudes who, had killed people. And I have a lot of great stories about that. And that Twitter thread exploded as well. So I've realized those things get more reads than my books. So I think that is the plan now. I'm actually working on a memoir-y thriller. I'm going to do it as an NFT project, as well as a book. And then I'm thinking television. I loved Californication. I loved Entourage. I think there's a place for this sort of story in that sort of setting. So that's what I'm thinking about right now. So you're absolutely right. And I have so many stories just because, the books that I write are always about these over-the-top wild people. And I'm this kind of neurotic, anxiety-ridden, just hide in your house kind of person. So I live vicariously as I write my books. I dive in and I get myself into some pretty scary situations following these people around to write their stories. And then I run back to my little rat hole. So I do think that there's a way to tell this story in a fun way. And so that's actually what I'm working on right now. Yeah.
Nice.
The story and the experience of prior to writing Bringing Down the House. I mean, obviously it's extreme. It could have gone much worse than the way it all kind of worked out. Yeah. But are you a person, I mean, in another sense in my head, it's like you almost don't want to regret that because that experience led to the next things in life. And really your books are all about, like you said, embedding yourself in these situations. So do you look back on that time in your life with regret? Would you change anything or
I mean,
how do you see it?
I would have bought an apartment or bought anything. I was living this sort of lifestyle where until just, fairly recently, I never owned anything that cost more than $5,000. I rented where I lived. I didn't have a car. I would just spend and spend and spend, but buy nothing solid and real, which is absolutely the wrong thing to do, especially in your 20s, when if you have a little bit of money coming in, you should be accumulating things that have value later in life. So there were points, where I was 30 years old and I could have walked away and had nothing, right? Because I didn't actually own anything. The first thing I actually bought was my wife's engagement ring in my entire life. So yeah, I have that level of regret. But in terms of the lifestyle, I mean, I would, how I spent that kind of money. I'd wake up on a Wednesday and I'd head to the airport and I'd have no bags, literally nothing. And I would buy a one-way ticket to somewhere like Paris or Tokyo or London or wherever. And I would check into the nicest hotel, like the Crillon in Paris, or I would go in Tokyo. I was staying at the Hyatt Roppongi Hills, if you've been there. In London, the St. Martin's Lane for a while, and then I moved over to the Mandarin Oriental or the Park Plaza in New York. And I would check in for weeks, right? And I would invite anybody I knew in Europe or wherever I was. And I had this group of degenerate friends. So you can't do this alone. You need a lot of degenerates with you. And they would all show up. And we would just live like that for a week, 2 weeks. It was like a traveling circus. And then I'd get on a plane when I was done and I'd fly to the next place. And I did this, and you can quickly accumulate massive debt doing this.
I believe that.
Yeah.
The bills. And listen, you don't even, I did not ever do any drugs. There was no drugs. I'm not a person who's ever touched that stuff. Alcohol, I certainly drank a lot. But it was really just living well. There wasn't any, horrible vices that would take you down, which I'm lucky that I didn't fall into those rabbit holes, obviously. But you rack up debt fast, and it's a very unwise way to live your life. And had I not run into the MIT blackjack team and found the story that put me on the map, who knows where I would have ended up. Like I said in the thread, I had a stack of business school applications under my bed, and I reached a point where I was so in debt that I was like, the only way out of this is I got to go work for some hedge fund somewhere. And, I had a good background. I went to a good college. My parents, I was lucky enough to start in a place that wasn't, abject poverty. So I wasn't going to starve necessarily, but I would have had to have really worked really hard to ever get myself out of that hole and had a normal life. And then lightning struck. I found the story that changed my life. But in your question, going back to your question, yes, had I not lived like that, I would not have been prepared to write the movie that became 21, right? Because I had hosts in Vegas. I had stayed in all of these hotels. I had people I could call who would, I would say, I want to get into the security room at Caesar's Palace. And they'd be like, oh, sure, absolutely. I need a private eye. I knew I had guys, FBI agents, CIA agents. Like I could make calls to sort of anyone you could think of because I had run into them over these 3 years of living like a wild man. And so like when I write a story about Russian oligarchs, I'd been on these boats before, right? I'd been on a yacht in St. Bart's with a Russian oligarch before. So it wasn't the first time I'd walked into that story. And if you look at all of my stories going forward, I mean, I had never hung out with Mark Zuckerberg, but I certainly knew what it was like to live around these people and this crazy wealth and this crazy kind of lifestyle. So I don't regret the life experiences because I could never have written these books had I not lived like that. But I do regret not, squirreling something away for a later date. And I do not recommend that sort of lifestyle for anyone, simply because you can really get screwed up. And if I didn't get lucky, I don't know how you get out of that hole.
Yeah, no doubt. You were definitely digging a hole, but hey, somehow you found a way out. I wrote a book, and I wanted to know what it was like. I wrote a thriller. This was a book called, what was it called? The Carrier. Nobody's read this book. It was under a pen name, Holden Scott. There's a little alpha for you. I had a secret pen name for a couple books. And in the book, the main character steals $250,000 and goes on the run. So I took $250,000 in cash and I carried it on a Greyhound bus and I traveled from Boston to Chicago to know what it would feel like to have with you the amount of cash that someone would kill you for. And I remember this, I'm sitting on a bus with duffel bags of cash, thinking the guy next to me has no idea that I've got. And that was preparation for the sort of books that I ended up writing. Again, not recommended for anybody, but stories like that, it was just the way I was living, and it ended up informing how I ended up becoming a writer. Well, that's what I wanted to touch on here is that the way you write your books, I mean, never mind your experience just in the beginning stages before you really had anything picked up. But even to this day, you really immerse yourself in the story to sort of get that ground level intel on and be able to tell the story properly. But it leads to, because of the stories you often write, it leads to these experiences that are maybe so out of the norm compared to your, let's say, regular life, or when you go back and now you've got to actually just, write the books and that sort of thing. What's it like having these sort of two different lifestyles that need to merge together to do what you do?
I mean, the double life is a theme in a lot of my books, to be honest, because I do think it's a lot of us live it, even if we don't mean to. But I definitely have an extreme version of that because, in my writing life, I'm willing to do just about anything. I'll follow these characters around, people like the Winklevoss Twins, who are absolutely larger than life. I'm nothing like the Winklevoss Twins, but I want to become the third Winklevoss twin to write their story. So I spend as much time, traveling with them as I can and being with them. But then I go home to like I say, a rat in a hole. I'm a normal, not even normal. I'm a person who really doesn't leave the house necessarily. I'm someone who is pretty much, homebound before COVID. This is how I always was. I've got kids. I've got a regular kind of lifestyle, but the books allow me to live beyond that. So yeah, I don't know. I've always kind of compartmentalized things very well. I can really turn a switch and go from being one thing to another. As a writer, I'm a fly on the wall. My goal is to just become so, much a part of the character's life that they don't even remember I'm there. And I can follow these people around to sort of extreme things. And I don't come in with a notebook or a tape recorder. I'm not that kind of a journalist. And they know that. I'm not a newspaper man. I'm not attempting to out them. I'm not attempting to, uncover a rock that they don't want you to uncover. I want to tell their story in their words as much as I can, or through their lives as much as I can. So that allows me access that a lot of journalists probably don't have. It's very different than, say, if some Wall Street Journal reporter is going to follow you around. You're going to be nervous about what you say and what you're showing them. But if it's me in a bar at 2 a.m, it's a totally different experience. Or in Vegas or wherever it is that you are. So that's how I want to be when I write the stories. But in my real life, I'm not that guy. I'm not at a bar at 2 a.m. I'm not, at some crazy party in Vegas normally. So yeah, I think that I'm able to compartmentalize and just turn it on and off. And just, part of it is I never lived in LA, right? I didn't live in New York. I lived in Boston. Boston is a normal place where people are, I would go out to LA or whatever, but I was always kind of an outsider in that world. And so, yeah, it just allowed me to sort of switch it on and off.
What about seeing your books get turned into movies? I mean, I know that that's kind of how you approach things in a sense today when you're planning your next book. But prior to Bringing Down the House, that wasn't probably the case. And you got to see that get turned into 21. And then the Accidental Billionaires years later turned into The Social Network. How was that experience from your perspective? And, how is that translated to how you approach writing today?
Yeah. So listen, I've always wanted my books to be movies. I've always seen what I do as a way of writing a movie in the form of a book. So I did always approach it that way. I always wanted to be Michael Crichton. I wanted Jurassic Park. I wanted that. And I got very lucky with Bringing Down the House. I rented as a group of MIT kids. I was traveling with them. I joined the MIT Blackjack team to write the story. And I wrote a book proposal, and then it ended up selling it. And for not a lot of money, it was like a little book because Vegas wasn't hot yet. And this was before Chris Moneymaker won the World Series. If you remember, that was the big turning point for cards. And yet, the book exploded, and I had gotten a random phone call out of the blue. I had written an article for Wired magazine about the story. This was like 3 weeks before the book came out. And I get a call from Kevin Spacey. And back then, that was a good thing. It's a different time now. Getting a call from Kevin Spacey today might not be as thrilling, but at the time, it was, he was the biggest actor in the world.
Oh, yeah.
You can remember. And he's like, I want to make this into a movie. And it was, again, lightning striking. It was just insane. And I went out to LA, and I remember he picked me up at the airport in a Mercedes convertible. It was Kevin Spacey and his business partner, Dana Bernetti. And we're driving along, and I'm this kid from Boston. I was young. I'd never been here. And I recognized where we're going. We pull into the Playboy Mansion, literally picked me up from the airport and drove me to the Playboy Mansion. And we walk in, there's half with all his girls, and it was like movie night. It wasn't even a party. It was hanging out. And I knew they were snowing me a little bit. They were like, we're going to get this kid wrapped up and get him to sell us his project. And it really was this moment. And then you fast forward to, it took a number of years to get 21 made. Although we had Kevin Spacey attached to play, the lead. The script took a while, all this kind of stuff. But when you first see it on screen, it's just this moment in your life. I watched it at a screening at the Sony lot and Columbia Pictures, and I was sitting next to Lawrence Fishburne for the screening. So it was really like an empty theater with me and Lawrence Fishburne, Morpheus, right?
Wow.
And watching your characters that you spent a long time with, that you really lived with, and suddenly they're being played by big actors. And it was just a mind-blowing moment where you're like, oh my God, this is what it's all about. I never wanted to, be that literary author who just wrote books. I wanted that. I wanted a book to turn into a movie, a television show, or a bigger and bigger process. So that was really a big moment in my life. And then you get to The Social Network, which is just on a whole nother level because, that's one of the greatest movies of the last century. It's, even if I had nothing to do with it, I think I would say that it's just that good a movie, but dark and intense. And you have people like Aaron Sorkin and David Fincher, and who are, incredible artists, but terrifying people. So it was a process to get there. It's been awesome. I've been very fortunate, and how I've changed how I perceive things. Ever since 21, and this goes back now 15 years or so, I don't write a book unless I've already sold the movie. So I write a screenplay. I write a proposal, which is like a 10-page treatment. I sell it in Hollywood as a movie. Then I sell the book rights. I write the book while a screenwriter is attempting to develop the screenplay. And it moves everything forward that way. And so for 15 books now, that's how I've done it.
Very interesting. So Did you experience some level of pressure? What was it like? So Bringing Down the House gets turned into 21. You have this euphoric moment, as you just described with Kevin Spacey. And then from the time between...
The euphoric moment with Kevin Spacey does not sound
sorry.
That's good anymore. But yeah, come on.
As I was saying that, I was like, oh, maybe I could have chose different words. Anyways, so between that and The Social Network, did you feel a level of pressure to kind of duplicate that experience? Was that a stressful time for you, wondering if that would happen again?
It was not. What happened was that book became such a huge bestseller. I mean, I know it's been a lot of time since then, but that book was in the top 3 in the New York Times bestseller list for 2 years, every week for 2 years. So I went on this crazy run where I was on a continuous book tour with that book, where you're on TV every day and you're traveling, the world, signing copies of the book. And so it feels like, it's never going to end when that happens. And so I was writing, and I went to a really crazy writing phase where I wrote, a book every 6 months. And I was selling TV shows, I was selling movies. None of them were getting made. But I didn't really feel that pressure because the book was such a big book. It felt like, okay, everything's going to work out. And then I stumbled into the Facebook story. So it was kind of like a steamroll at that point. Again, another accident, random email at 2 a.m. What happened was Bringing Down the House was such a big book that I was starting to get pitches from every college kid who'd done something crazy, from anyone in prison who wanted to try and get their story out. I was just getting hundreds and hundreds of pitches every day. And I just got a random email. A guy said, my best friend founded Facebook and no one's ever heard of him. And I went to a bar in Boston and walked Eduardo, the real Eduardo Savern. And no one had ever spoken to Eduardo. No one knew he existed. There was just Mark Zuckerberg. And Eduardo was in the midst of suing Facebook to try and get his piece of the action. And he told me this incredible story. And so I wrote a 10-page book proposal, which I called Face Off, which, was a horrible title because there'd already been a movie called Face Off. But anyway, it leaked onto the internet. My book proposal leaked onto the internet on Gawker. Gawker printed my entire book proposal. And that day, Facebook settled with Eduardo for $5 billion to try and get him to stop talking to me. And he cut off all contact with me. He ran to Singapore, never to be heard from again. And that day, Aaron Sorkin saw it online and said, I want to write this as my next movie. And David Fincher saw it online and said, I want to direct this as my next movie. And so by the end of that day, I had this incredible movie deal set up. I hadn't written a book yet, right? So I locked myself in a hotel with Aaron Sorkin and basically wrote the book and handed him chapters as they went. But there was never a point where there was pressure because it had happened all just kind of a steamroll. The time between when 21 came out and the Facebook story was happening, Eduardo came with me to the movie premiere for 21. So it was all kind of wrapped into one kind of thing, even though there was a few years in between those two movies. And then that movie was just on a whole nother level. Then you're at the Oscars and it's just your life kind of flies into that realm. And then since then, it's, how do you recapture that? How do you ever do The Social Network again? Can you even do The Social Network again? You can't really think about it that way. You think about it more like, I want to tell great stories, and you just keep looking for those wonderful, incredible stories. And, been fortunate the Winklevoss Twins keep doing incredible things, but it's just moved me forward and forward. And so, now I fell into the NFT world and the crypto world, and it just feels like one accident after another leads me to another big kind of thing.
Ulf, do you realize our audience has been either watching or listening to this episode for 20 minutes?
20 minutes? No, they should probably subscribe.
Yeah, they should subscribe. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you comment and turn on notifications. And if you're listening to this podcast, especially if you're on Apple Podcasts, leave us a rating and a review.
We're also on Twitter, Instagram, and even TikTok. So go check out the episode description. You can find all that information below. And we have an update on the NFT, don't we?
That's right. We didn't previously mention this, but this NFT for our OG supporter is a one of one. There will only be one of this kind ever minted, and we have a few surprises for the person who purchases it. The link is in the episode description.
And back to the episode.
So you mentioned there, Ben, the Winklevoss Twins, and it was a cool experience for me. So it was December 2020 and my fiance bought me Bitcoin Billionaires, and it was kind of perfect timing because Ulf and I were just launching this podcast. I read that book. I'm a slow reader, and it was a week for me, which is record time for me. That's very fast to read a book. And it just immersed me and it got me all pumped up. And then the bull run was just kind of ramping up at that point. So it was an exciting time. But I'm curious, what was it like in that book, Bitcoin Billionaires? You're hanging out with some of the OGs of crypto. You've got the Winklevoss Twins. You've got Charlie Shrem. I'm not sure if you personally...
I love Charlie, by the way. Charlie's an awesome guy. Went down to Florida and hung out with him and his wife, and he's really awesome. I really, I know him and the Twins don't get along, and there was a lot of drama between them that was really intense. And people have their opinions about Charlie. Let's face it, he's a character. But really, really, really enjoyed being with him.
So what did you learn from that experience, spending so much quality time with those individuals who are so early to the space?
And Roger Ver and Eric, I just lost his last name. Voorhees, right. So I didn't know anything about Bitcoin when I went to that story. I have to tell you, people had pitched me Bitcoin stories over the years, and I was just not that excited about it. It's like numbers and math, and I hate the word blockchain. I think it's a terrifying word that just doesn't resonate with me. I just didn't want to write the story. And then I saw the Winklevoss Twins were the first Bitcoin billionaires. I saw it in the New York Times, the Nathaniel Popper article. And I was like, holy crap, those are the bad guys from the social network that I had stayed friends with them. I liked the Winklevoss. I'd stayed in touch with them. And they had pushed Bitcoin on me. Many times I'd been at parties with them when they'd be like, you should just buy some Bitcoin. It was like $100. And of course, I never bought any Bitcoin. And so I went out to New York and I started hanging out with them. I was like, you guys got to tell me this story. This is incredible, because now I'm interested in Bitcoin. The idea that there's these two gigantic, almost mythological, identical twins growing who are billionaires because of Bitcoin. That's the story. And so I learned everything from them. I knew nothing about Bitcoin. And they really taught me about it. They taught me, and their vision is, they're such believers, right? In everything about this economy and in Web3. And it's intriguing because it's contradictory to who you think they are. They're these, they're the epitome of the hierarchy. They appear to be those guys who are the old, the men of Harvard, who are the establishment. But the reality is they're part of this revolution, and they want to see this revolution happen. So they taught me a lot, and I really got into the whole libertarian sort of view of it. Almost the extreme views from Roger Ver, and then from Charlie, who was a bit more of a party guy, who was a guy who was doing it because it was fun and it was cool and it was a get him out of the basement, and the whole degen kind of feel to him. I learned about, and then from the Twins, I learned about NFTs. I learned about what is possible maybe in that realm, and that's what got me into that. So they were my education into the whole crypto world, and I became a believer in where this is all going. Not necessarily, an investor. I didn't buy into Bitcoin, even though I obviously should have. But I really believed in it, and I felt that the people who are doing it were doing it for the right reasons. And I wanted to see them all succeed. I really wanted to see all these people in their basements, becoming millionaires, because I think they were all trying to break free from the hegemony, or the way things that have been forever that seem very unfair. Even though I've written about Wall Street for years, and I love Wall Street, and I have so many friends on Wall Street, they're the bad guys, right? I think that's just pretty clear. Even my friends who are there would admit that they're kind of the bad guys. So I think there's something really cool about this sort of revolution to take that on. I learned it all from these guys.
And when can we expect to see Bitcoin Billionaires on film? Yeah,
so I'm not really allowed to announce anything, but I think we're getting very, very close. The Twins are the leads on this. They're the lead producers. We're working with Greg Silverman, who used to run Warner's Pictures. He runs Stampede Pictures now, and the Winklevoss and Greg. And there is a phenomenal project coming together. So I actually think sooner than later, we're going to see some news on it. The question of who will cast as the Winklevoss comes up, because Armie Hammer, has some issues. I guess he can't really get past the cannibalism that easily, although I think he's a phenomenal actor. I'd love to see Armie, come back. I'm not the guy who makes those decisions. And quite frankly, that's a tough one to come back from. But we'll see. We'll see what actors can play the twins.
In terms of, so in the Bitcoin community, you write this book, Bitcoin Billionaires, which obviously follows the Winklevoss twins, who are very involved. I know that they have this more open-mindedness, but in the Bitcoin community itself, sometimes there's this strong sense of Bitcoin maximalism. Have you experienced that personally, like veering off into NFTs, or people like, Ben, you're doing the wrong thing. You got to focus just on Bitcoin.
You see it online a lot. I love NFTs. I've got an NFT project, the Ben NFT, which has had some success, and we're moving forward on a very big plan with that. So people should buy some NFTs because it's going to be a huge platform. But I get it. I love Bitcoin, and I that's where I started in this space, right? Bitcoin Billionaires was like the Bible to so many people who got into this world, which is what my goal was. I felt like I was telling an origin story of something that's going to be life-changing. So I love to see people got into it because of that, which is fantastic. But, I do think that there will be a weeding out. I do think that, listen, only a few of these things are going to survive. They're not all going to survive. And Bitcoin, to me, is clearly the one that is going to be the blue chip. It's going to be the one that we should be going forwards with. And if you're going to only own one thing, Bitcoin is the one. And I get that. However, I think what's going on in NFTs is incredibly important. And I don't think you want to throw out the whole technology and the whole idea of owning digital images in a unique way, and what grows from that because you believe in Bitcoin. I think that that's kind of crazy. So there needs to be a way for that sort of building on it to happen, because really we all agree that the blockchain is the important part here. That's the technology that is changing the world, and it's going to give everyone the freedom to do whatever they want. And Bitcoin is one piece of that, but it can't contain all of it. So I think it's a little nearsighted to only focus on one thing. But listen, like when I go to Vegas, blackjack is the game, right? But I still like to play roulette, right? I still like to play video poker, even as stupid as it is. I enjoy all these other things. And so I don't think that there's a reason to sort of close your mind to everything else just because you believe in Bitcoin.
I love the tying it back to a casino analogy, gambling analogy.
Well, everything ties back to Vegas.
Yeah. We actually recently interviewed Cami Russo, who wrote the book The Infinite Machine, which is a telling of the story behind Ethereum and its creation. And her book's being made into a movie, which, as far as I know, is going to be the first movie that really focuses on Ethereum and tells that story. With your book, Bitcoin Billionaires, being turned into a movie, we've got these, at least two or more, movies that are really focused on subject matter in the crypto space, and at a level that could get a lot of eyes on it, a lot of attention. Do you think that movies like this, yours and Cami's and others, is going to help with mainstream adoption and sort of telling the story and getting people into the space?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm doing an NFT project as well. So my NFT project leads to a movie. If you own all of our sets, you're sharing in a screenplay with me that I'm writing about the NFT space. I do believe that the way you get mainstream adoption is a movie, is a giant movie. I think what the social network did for Facebook was immense. It wasn't our purpose. We were not trying to make Mark Zuckerberg into the creature that he is today, but it certainly changed the whole feel of that, and it made it into a really worldwide phenomenon. And I think the same thing will happen when Bitcoin Billionaires comes out, and when a big sort of Ethereum project comes out, because people average regular people have no idea what's going on in this space still to this day. I mean, we all know so much about crypto and Bitcoin because we're in it, but if you go to a random person in the middle of the country, they think that's that crazy thing that those people in their basements do, right? None of them have any idea. So to reach that level will take a big Hollywood project, and the right project. It can't be. I always look at the 21 versus Rounders. Rounders is an incredible movie. It's one of my favorite movies. But Rounders was made for people who play poker, and there are people who will never understand that movie. right? And then you look at 21, which is aimed at everyone who turned 21. It's just, that's the kind of movie you need to reach everyone, not an insider movie. And so that's going to be the tricky thing, is how do you tell like the NFT story? How do you tell the Bitcoin story, but not to insiders? That's what I love about, the Winklevoss Twins is I think that's how you tell that story. Whatever you think of the Winklevoss Twins, they capture attention. And even Charlie Shrem said it in the book, is that they became sort of the liaisons to the real world for a guy like Charlie. And that's what I think you need in a movie about Bitcoin or crypto. You need some way of getting my grandmother, right? Who would never understand Bitcoin to suddenly want to watch a movie about Bitcoin. And so that's the trick to it all.
I want to dive a bit deeper into your NFT project and how that all works. But first, at a high level, you were on another podcast, I think it was last December, and you talked about the fact that this Bitcoin adoption thing, there were a select group of people that understood it before everyone else, even though it wasn't the mainstream. We had heard of Bitcoin in 2011, 2012, but it was this crazy thing. People didn't pay much attention to it, but it kind of happened in front of their eyes. You said that, in your opinion, the same thing is happening with NFTs right now. Yeah. What gives you that conviction?
I mean, listen, regular people, have heard of Bored Apes now, right? And they might have seen something somewhere about an NFT, but they really don't know anything about it. And then you've got this group of about 100,000 people who are obsessed, who are living 24 hours a day in this space, who are going on these Discord channels. And Discord is discombobulated, chaotic Wild West, a mess of a platform. But there are hundreds of thousands of people who are living on these things every day. And you see these crazy run-ups in these things into real money, right? Overnight. And then projects, rug pulls and scams and all of this stuff going on. But it's all going on behind this closed door. And we're all walking by this door all day long. And we're not seeing what's happening there. And it really reminds me of what happened with Bitcoin and crypto, over the, 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, before it became something that we read about or see on the CNBC ticker every morning. People are not talking about NFTs in the mainstream. They might know what it is, but certainly no one is thinking about it as a life-changing, world-changing thing. But there's 100,000 people who do see that it is going to be life-changing and world-changing. And then you have these big brands like Nike and Reebok and Disney and Hollywood movie studios who are all really interested and are all intrigued. And they know that there's going to be massive amounts of money built into this realm. There's going to be billions upon billions of dollars that are going to pour into this space. And so they're all trying to figure out, how do we access it? How do we move into it? And that's that thing, that's that feeling you get where, okay, this has to happen. Because if you've got all these giant companies on the sideline trying to figure out how to get into it, and you've got this really passionate group of people that are willing to put their lives into it, it's going to come to a head and it's going to be a big movement. And so that's where I feel like we're right now. And that's why I really wanted to get into this space. I've always been on the sidelines. I've always kind of written about things or kind of watched things happen. But I do feel like, okay, this is the origin of something immense that will also have big ramifications for artists, for writers. This is a place for someone like me to build a community around something, to have a community that's incentivized to see my projects go forward and to actually create my art via this technology. And that's kind of an interesting moment. So yes, I do think we're at a moment where Bitcoin was when the Winklevoss first got into it. I think we're at that moment with NFTs. And there's going to be lots of rises and falls. There's going to be a horrible bear crypto winter that we're going to all go through over the next, hopefully not too long. It's all going to happen like that. But in the end, I think this thing's going to be immense over the next 5 years. I really do think so.
Well, I love how you explain that, because NFTs, Wade and I have had a ton of guests on the show specifically centered around NFT conversations, and it really is wild. And I think a lot of the time you need to have conversation. You need to talk to people to get their ideas and thoughts on where it can go, because we're not there yet. Because like you said, we're still like in this early stage where, yeah, the technology exists, but we haven't figured out all the ways it can really be applied.
Yeah.
And we just know that there's a lot of power behind it, and it can empower individuals, primarily artists, in so many different ways, a lot of which haven't been explored yet.
Yeah, I mean, we're in the infancy. It's going to be artists and it's going to be big brands. I think those are the two things that are going to find so much value in this space. And I like to tell the story, my dad is 80 years old. And when I talk to him about NFTs, he's like, this is ridiculous. Who is ever going to buy a JPEG? This is idiotic. And then my 12-year-old son is in the other room buying clothes for his Fortnite character, right? So it's like, obviously, this is a generational thing, right? We're moving. My kids are going to grow up in a world where it makes perfect sense to them to buy things like this. They, for their birthday, they don't want real stuff. They want Roblox stuff, right? They want stuff for their video games, and that's NFTs. That's all that is. And yet, we're not there yet. Obviously, you're right. We're not. We're still at that phase right now before we get there. But that's why it's exciting. And that's why if you're getting into this space now, I think it's not necessarily important, the gambling, the speculative aspects, what you buy, whether it's going to go up and down. What's important is the knowledge. You need to learn about this space and understand this space. I mean, if I were 20 years old, I would be devouring this, because I do think over the next decade, this is the direction everyone's going to want to go. So yeah, you should be trying to learn as much as you can right now.
And so follow up to that is, for you and your project that you've kind of, you've given us some tidbits along the way, but I'd love to just hear, what are you doing with NFTs? Give us the full meal deal here. Let us know all the details. The whole story.
So the NFT, we launched our first drop. The whole plan is 3 drops. Each one revolves around the sort of stuff that I write about. So the first drop were these rockets that had to do with the GameStop story. I wrote a book called Antisocial Network about the GameStop drama, which is being made into a movie right now. So the first drop was 6,000 pieces at 0.06 ETH. It's on the Ethereum blockchain. If you own one of each of the 3 drops, you're going to share in a screenplay that I'm writing about the NFT space. So basically, whatever happens with that screenplay, if it becomes a big movie or a television series, it's going to be split down the middle with me and my NFT holders. So it's an opportunity to be a part of this artistic project. We have a very kind of fun and vibrant Discord where people hang out. We call it the BenFT, or Friends with BenFTs. So that was the first drop. The second drop was a free drop to the people who own the first drop. And so there's about 2,300 of them in existence now, and they're called Bitcoin Billies. And so for the Bitcoin maximalists, they're all Bitcoin revolve around PFP kind of pictures, but they're on the Ethereum blockchain, so it's kind of this fun thing. And then the third drop is going to be coming up in a few weeks, and it is our Vegas drop. And so it's going to relate back to the stuff I did for Bringing Down the House, and that's going to be another 6,000 pieces. So there's basically an opportunity to own one of each of the 3. Once you own all 3, you get 1 screenplay share. There are rarity traits that can give you more than 1 share of the screenplay. And then there's all this other fun stuff. So a bunch of the owners were invited to my last book party. So every time I do a book party or a movie premiere, these are going to be your entrance into that. We're throwing parties in New York and Vegas, that sort of thing. And then we're doing things like watching the social network together on the Discord for holders and things like that. So I'm attempting to incorporate the community into all of my projects going forward. And then the platform, hopefully, our plan is to grow it bigger, where I'm going to bring other authors in, and new authors are going to break on the platform. So the community can decide if an author's work is something they're interested in by buying the NFT for it and pushing that author forward. So similar to what Substack does or what Amazon Kindle does, but this gives the opportunity for the community to own a piece of it and to be a part of it going forwards. So if this author explodes and becomes the next Tom Clancy, you actually are going to get value out of that as well. And that's what the incredible, thing about NFTs is. It's not just sort of Substack where you're giving a journalist some money so they can go write. You're actually a part of it. It's a way for an author to have a community that is really part of their world going forwards. And so right now I'm talking to other author friends of mine who are going to launch their own projects on the platform, and our Genesis rocket will become part of their platforms going forwards. We're helping the Boston Globe do their 150th anniversary NFT. So the BenFT holders are going to get to be a part of that. So that's really the goal, is it turns into a place for writers and people who like books and movies to be a part of this world.
What's so cool about this is obviously artists, traditional artists, I guess, have kind of, and graphic designers have had their moment in the sense of like they were the initial group that benefited. Musicians is a big trend we're starting to see, but now we're seeing authors as well, which is such a cool evolution. 2 questions on that. Question number 1, when will the snapshot-ish be taken for the 3 NFT holders to make sure that they get the movie share? But then the second question on top of that as well is, are there any concerns? Because we talk about like securities laws and things like that. Any concerns there?
Sure. So before we started the project, we spent 6 months with law firms. We wanted to be really careful. We weren't just going to launch something that wasn't feasible. So we really did the groundwork. And when you opted in, there's a whole kind of a big opt-in process when people minted the tokens. That pretty much gives you the idea of what it is that you're getting. You're part of this artistic endeavor that hopefully will work out. But you have to go in with open eyes to the whole thing. And it really is still the Wild West. NFT projects, there is not a lot of great sort of communication from where this is, from the SEC or anything like that about where this whole world is going. So our goal was to set it up in as clear and as safe a way we could so that our people who buy into it understand they're getting into a project that has done that legwork. So yes, I do think that there's still a lot of issues that the government has to work out in understanding what NFTs are. But as of right now, it appears that, a work of art that you're a participant in is absolutely fine as long as you understand what it is that you're getting into. So that's the way we're looking at it. And that's, you can take a look at, go to benmezrichnft.com and you can see all of the details of how we work that out. In terms of the snapshot, so our plan is I'm going to be at NFT NYC and talking about this project. And then shortly after that, we're going to do drop 3. And then within 2 weeks of drop 3, we're going to do the snapshot. We'll be pretty clear about when that specifically is. And I do think because the Bitcoin Billy ones is kind of the bottleneck because there's only about 23 or 2,500 of those. Getting a set of 3 is going to be, fun. There's some gamesmanship to it, obviously. But right now, everything's really cheap. When we set out to do this, our goal was, we want there to be 6,000 people who are a part of this. We didn't want sort of price. So we launched them at 0.06 ETH, which is not crazy. It's never been about selling NFTs to make money. I don't really care about that. And I think our group always had this thought that the goal is to build this platform that becomes something really important and big and fun. And that's the key to it. And that's what people outside the NFT space, I think, forget, is that it's actually fun. It's not just about speculation. It's not just gambling. There's something very fun about it. I'm going to have hopefully 3,000 to 6,000 people who are producers on my movie, and we're all going to have a huge movie premiere and watch the movie that came out of this project together. I'm going to be showing the script on the Discord so people can, have comments. We're going to be talking it through every step of the way until it's written. I have 6 months to write the screenplay after the 3rd drop. So that's the timing of it. So I'm going to spend those 6 months working and finishing up the screenplay. It won't take anywhere near that long. And then the process of getting a movie made, whether we go to a big studio or partner with sort of an independent production company or raise the financing ourselves. Those are kind of the 3 options when you make a movie. And I've had some success in all 3 of those areas before. So we'll see which route we decide to go based on what the screenplay looks like. But it should be really fun. And there's a lot of people in the space who can make movies. That's what's kind of cool about it is we have partners and friends who have made movies, who have the financing to make movies. So it's really something that can be done. And, I always see all these NFT projects that talk about we're putting a DAO together to make a movie. And I'm like, these people can't make a movie. I just know how Hollywood works. And it's very easy to raise money, but it's very hard to get something made. It's really easy to talk about movies but there's not a lot of people who've actually done it. And so I'm really hopeful that we'll be the one that makes the really cool NFT movie. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. It's going to be a process.
Well, full disclosure for our audience, we always like to say when we own certain NFT projects. I don't currently own any NFTs, but I promise you after this episode launches, I'm probably going to pick some up. So just so our audience knows, I will be a holder probably by the time they eventually get to watching this. It's been so interesting. We wish you all the best with this project, Ben. We're getting close to the end of our episode, and we ask every guest the same 3 questions. So we'll get to those in a second. But one question I really want to ask you is around Mark Zuckerberg, because he has come into the space. He clearly wants to make his mark on his own metaverse and changing the company name to Meta. You were probably the perfect person to ask this with your experience, all of the conversations you had around the Accidental Billionaires. What do you make of how Mark Zuckerberg has approached this space?
I mean, Mark Zuckerberg is so obsessed with the Winklevoss Twins. That's my belief, that he wakes up every morning saying, what are they doing? I've got to do it. He tried so hard with Libra, right, which was such a disaster, which we all knew was going to be a disaster because Zuckerberg, he just hasn't been trustworthy. What they've done in this, with Facebook, it was such a beautiful idea, I really think. And his dream and his vision were really in the right place. He wanted to create a world where we live in this village of Facebook. But he can't help himself. He's a megalomaniac. He thinks that what he does is correct, that people will fall to whatever it is that he comes up with. And he thought he could walk into crypto and create a coin and become the next Bitcoin. And I think he feels the same way about the NFT space with Meta. However, they do have a very huge platform, right? I mean, Facebook is immense and enormous, and they have technology and they have sort of all of this stuff going on. So I would not count them out in Meta, but I think his vision always involves these silos of Facebook owning it. You need to be a part of Facebook to be in Meta. That's what he wants. Will Web3 and the open world of what the Winklevoss Twins believe win out, or will the idea of a silo that we have to be a part of win out? It's going to be a battle. I think that there's a third act to the Winklevoss, Zuckerberg story. I wouldn't count him out. He's incredibly powerful, and what he's done is pretty immense and incredible. But I don't think his vision aligns with the Web3 vision at all. And I think, so we'll see, does he have the edge in the technology? Is he able to have the edge because he has the numbers? Or will the philosophies of this kind of free and open world win out? I think that's going to be the problem. It seems like he watches Ready Player One and wants to be the bad guy, which seems to be a strange choice. But it seems to be the choice he makes over and over again.
Well, we can't wait for your book and then the follow-up movie to the third act, because I'm sure it's going to be incredible when it does eventually happen. Well, as I mentioned, Ben, we like to end every episode of Show Me the Crypto with the same 3 questions we ask every guest. It's a segment we call You Had Me at Crypto. Ulf's going to ask you those questions.
All right, Ben, you ready for it?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right. So the first question, who's your favorite person to follow in the crypto space?
Wow. In the crypto space, that's a hard question. I love Pomp. I think Pomp is a lot of fun. I love the Winklevoss, both of them. I follow both the Winklevoss. I think Scaramouche is awesome. He's fun. The Mooch is a fun follow. I know I'm forgetting. There's so many people. Raoul Paul, I think, is great. I follow so many people in the space. It's hard to list just 1 or 2 people. I guess that's. I
mean, you've already done 4 here, so you're doing fine. Awesome. Okay, those are all great picks. Second question: what will the price of Bitcoin be 10 years from now?
10 years from now?
10 years.
I would say. I think it's going to hover in the 100,000 range. I think the 100,000 range seems like the target to me of where Bitcoin ends up for a very long time. I think it'll stabilize there.
All right. Well, just so intel wise, we've got many other much higher guesses than 100,000.
No, but lately everyone's been around 100,000. During the bull run, people were like a million, 10 million. Now people have calmed down a little bit. So yeah.
I mean, I've always thought, the Winklevoss Twin used to tell me 250,000. That was kind of their target, or where they thought. But I've always thought 100,000 seemed like the right number. But we'll see.
Yeah. All right. Third question here. What is the most underrated coin or project in all of crypto?
Other than Ben FTs.
Other than the Ben FT.
Yeah. Underrated
coin or project. So I don't know so much about the coins. I have to tell you, I definitely like what ETH is going to do. I think ETH is going forward in this. That's where our project lies. In the NFT space, there's a lot of undervalued projects, I think. But I really also think we're so early that it's not really about the projects. It's about the platforms. It's about the people. because these projects will go up and down a million times over the next couple of years. But these people are the ones that you should be looking at and following.
Ben, this was a huge highlight for us to have you on our show. Thank you so much for joining Ulf and I on this episode of Show Me the Crypto.
Thank you. It was a blast.
Thank you for listening to Show Me the Crypto. Please make sure to subscribe as well as rate and review this podcast.